world was still young and cruel. A sea of white stretched endlessly across Europe, where winter never truly ended. The wind howled like a living creature, scraping across frozen cliffs and valleys drowned in mist. Every breath turned to smoke. Every step on the frost-hardened ground echoed against eternity. Beneath the iron-grey sky, they lived, the Neanderthals. Not monsters, not myths, but families carved from endurance. Their hands were thick, scarred by stone and fire. Their eyes glowed amber under the light of burning pine. In their caves, flickering flames painted walls with stories, hunts, storms, births, deaths. Here, fire was more than warmth. It was memory, language, and soul. At dusk, the tribe gathered close around a single blaze. The elder spoke softly in their guttural tongue, telling of the great beasts that roamed the plains, mammoths with ivory towers for tusks, wolves that hunted in silence, and skies that rained ice instead of mercy. Children leaned against their mothers, half asleep but dreaming of tomorrow's hunt. The women sharpened spears with stone, and the men listened for the distant thunder of hooves in the valley below. Outside, the wind screamed through the ridges. Inside, laughter and breath created a fragile pocket of warmth, a heartbeat against the cold. Then, one night, when the moon was a pale scar in the clouds, something changed. The hunter named Oren was returning from the ridge, his fur cloak heavy with frost. He stopped midway, eyes narrowing at a strange impression on the snow. Not the paw of a wolf, not the hoof of a reindeer, but a footprint, a human footprint, smaller than theirs, narrower, the shape unfamiliar, almost delicate. He crouched, tracing the edge with a calloused finger. The print was fresh, filled with melting ice. Whoever made it had walked this path not long ago. Oran's breath quickened. He looked toward the dark tree line, where fog clung to the pines. Nothing moved, only silence and the faint hiss of snow. He felt something he had never felt before. Uncertainty. Not fear of beasts, not fear of night, but fear of something unseen that walked like him. When he returned to the cave, the others listened in uneasy quiet. No one spoke for a while. The elder tossed a branch into the fire. Sparks rose and vanished like ghosts. "They walk as we do," someone whispered. Oren nodded. The flames flickered wildly, painting his face in shifting orange. Outside, beyond the cliff, snow kept falling, erasing every footprint, every clue. But beneath the wind, the earth held its breath. The Neanderthals thought they were alone. They were wrong. The snow had begun to melt, but the cold never left. Mist clung to the valleys like a sleeping ghost, and the rivers ran dark with thawing ice. The Neanderthals watched from their ridges as something unfamiliar moved through the forest below, shadows that walked upright, yet not their own. At first, they thought it was illusion, light playing tricks on tired eyes. But the strangers returned. Day after day, they drifted through the trees, smaller, thinner, clothed in animal skins, dyed with strange colors. They carried sticks that gleamed with stone tips, and their faces were marked with red and black paint, symbols no Neanderthal could read. From afar, the watchers saw how these newcomers moved differently. They ran like wolves, quick, coordinated, silent. They spoke to one another in soft, rhythmic tones that rose and fell like songs. And when they raised their hands to the sky, it was as if they were speaking to something beyond the clouds. The tribe's elder, Sura, warned the others, "Do not go near them. They bring fire that is not born of trees, but curiosity, like hunger, always returns." One night, Oran, the hunter, who found the first footprints, followed the strangers alone. Through fog and pine he crept, until he saw them camped by the river, their fire brighter, hotter, blue at its core. He watched their shadows dance across the snow and listened to their strange words. It was not a language of growls or signs. It was melody, rhythm, something almost magical. He crouched behind a fallen log, heart pounding. Then suddenly, one of them turned. A woman smaller than he, her face painted in spirals of red clay. Her eyes met his through the smoke. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she raised her hand, slowly, palm open, fingers spread, the universal language of peace. For a moment, the world went still. Two species, separated by evolution, yet bound by the same firelight, simply looked at each other, curiosity and fear woven together like smoke in the wind. But behind Oren, a branch snapped. Another Neanderthal scout, panicked by the sight, hurled a spear. It missed the woman, striking the ground near the fire. The strangers leapt to their feet, shouting words that echoed through the forest. Oren fled into the trees, his heart thundering like a drum. By dawn, the strangers were gone. Only their campfire remained, still burning with that unnatural blue flame. Back in the cave, Oren spoke of what he saw. The fire that burned like lightning, the words that sounded like the sky itself. The tribe murmured in disbelief. Children whispered about the sky people, beings who could command the wind and stars. And from that day, the Neanderthals no longer believed they were the only humans on Earth. Something had changed forever, something they could never undo. Outside, the snow began to fall again, thin and slow. Somewhere far in the forest, another fire was lit, and this time it was not theirs. Winter came harder that year. The sky never turned blue, only shades of grey. Snow fell like endless ash, covering the valleys where life used to move freely. The mammoths had migrated far south. The rivers, once alive with fish, had turned to glass. Both tribes, Neanderthal and the newcomers, began to starve. The Neanderthals' fires burned weaker, their caves echoing with hollow stomachs and whispers of fear. Sura, the elder, looked upon her people, the children's faces pale, the hunters' eyes empty, and knew they would not survive another moon alone. Then came a night when the moon broke through the clouds for the first time in many weeks. Oren stood at the mouth of the cave, gazing down at the frozen valley. Far in the distance, across the white plain, another fire burned. Bright, steady, alive. The strangers were there, the ones who spoke the language of the sky. He remembered the woman with the painted face, and the gesture she made, open palm, no weapon. Perhaps hunger was stronger than fear. At dawn, he went down the slope with two hunters. They carried nothing but offerings, a carved stone tool, dried roots, and mammoth bone. When they reached the riverbank, the strangers were waiting. There were 7 of them, men, women, a child, standing cautious but not hostile. The woman stepped forward again. Her name, as they would later learn, was Asha. Her eyes reflected the same hunger, the same quiet desperation. Slowly, carefully, they traded. Dried roots for smoked fish, a bone knife for a burning branch of that strange, blue-tinted fire. No words were spoken, only gestures, nods, and trembling smiles. That night, for the first time in history, 2 fires burned side by side on the same riverbank, one golden-orange, one bluish-white. The flames mingled in the wind, their smoke twisting together like spirits learning to dance. Days passed, and the tribes began to meet again. They hunted in the same valleys, watched the same sky. Children played at the edges of the camp. One Neanderthal boy, chasing a smaller human girl through the snow, laughter echoing between trees. Around the fires, they discovered they could understand more than words. A glance, a gesture, a shared fear of the dark. And in this brief harmony, something impossible happened. Oran and Asher began to spend their nights near the same fire. They spoke through movement, through eyes and breath, through silence itself. When the ice melted and the rivers roared again, Asher bore a child, the first of a kind the world had never seen. The tribe stared at the infant with awe and terror. His skin was lighter than theirs, his eyes a strange shade between amber and grey. He cried like both, the sound wild, raw, and unfamiliar. The elder touched the child's cheek and whispered, "Not one of us, not one of them." The peace that hunger had forged began to tremble. Even as fires burned warm, a cold wind moved through every heart, a warning that no one yet understood. For in that child's small heartbeat, the future of mankind had just begun to change. The brief peace of the winter pact faded like the warmth of a dying flame. The ice returned sharper than before, crawling over the rivers and forests like a living curse. The sky turned white and stayed that way, a blank mirror that swallowed sound. The herds that once roamed the plains vanished. Where hundreds of mammoths had thundered, only bones now stood like monuments to hunger. The Neanderthals searched far and wide, but every hunt brought back less. The children's ribs showed beneath their fur wraps. The caves echoed with silence instead of laughter. And still, on the far side of the valley, smoke rose from the strangers' camp, thick and steady. Their fires never seemed to die. Their bodies looked fuller, stronger. They had learned to trap animals, to preserve meat with salt from the river stones. They survived, even thrived, while the Neanderthals began to fade. Whispers began among the tribe. They took the herds. They cursed the sky. They speak to spirits we do not know. Oran, torn between two worlds, tried to quiet the storm. He still visited Asher in secret, bringing gifts, flint, fur, pieces of carved bone. He saw her child and his own, the boy who carried both their blood. He smiled when the child laughed, but deep inside, fear coiled like a serpent. The others would not understand. One night, Tor, a Neanderthal warrior with a heart of iron, returned from a failed hunt with rage in his eyes. He dropped his empty spear by the fire and spat into the snow. "While our children starve," he growled, "the sky people feast." Sura, the elder, warned restraint, but hunger is louder than wisdom. When the next storm hit and the winds screamed through the cliffs, Tor gathered the desperate and the angry. They would take what was stolen. They would reclaim the favor of the gods. But Oran sensed danger. He followed their tracks through the blizzard, heart pounding, shouting into the wind, "Stop! They are not our enemies." The snow swallowed his voice. At the edge of the forest, he saw torchlight, moving shadows, heavy footsteps, the gleam of weapons. The stranger's camp was quiet, unaware. The Neanderthal's eyes burned with fury and frost. And then, the first arrow flew. A scream cut through the storm. Chaos erupted. Flames leapt high as fire met wind. Oran tried to stop them, his voice breaking with rage and sorrow, but in that moment, no one heard him. Not friend, not foe. Above it all, the hybrid child cried inside the stranger's tent, his wail cutting through the night, the sound of two bloodlines trembling at the edge of extinction. By dawn, the storm had passed. The valley lay in ruins, smoke curling over snow like ghosts refusing to leave. The fragile peace had died that night. And as the sun rose over the frozen hills, a new shadow, fell between the two species, one that would never be lifted again. Night fell heavy and cruel. The wind no longer whispered, it screamed. Snow swirled in furious spirals over the valley as if the sky itself wanted to bury what was about to happen. In the darkness, Tor's warriors moved like shadows. Their bodies were painted with ash. Their breaths steamed in the frozen air, each exhale a ghost of rage. They carried torches made from pine, soaked in animal fat, fire that could eat through snow. At the edge of the forest, the strangers' camp glowed softly, unaware. Children's laughter flickered faintly through the storm, muffled by distance. The smell of cooked meat drifted through the trees, enough to drive starving men to madness. Oran stood alone, between the two worlds. He could see the light of the camp below, and the fury of his tribe behind him. His heart felt like it would tear in two. "Please," he whispered, his voice trembling, "don't do this. We share the same fire." But Tor raised his spear, eyes wild with hunger and pride. "No, their fire has stolen our sky." The first torch flew. It arced through the night like a red comet, and when it landed, the world erupted. The strangers' tents caught instantly. Blue fire turned orange, smoke billowed upward, choking the stars. Screams tore through the storm, the kind that silence can never erase. Asha ran from her tent, clutching the hybrid child to her chest. Her eyes met Oren's across the flames, 1,000 words in one look: fear, betrayal, love, goodbye. Oren charged forward, shouting at both sides. He pulled a burning branch from the ground and swung it to push his own people back. But no one listened. The hunger had become war. Fire spread like vengeance, devouring everything. Fur tents, wooden frames, spears, memories. Children cried, warriors fell. The storm mixed with ash, snow melting into black mud beneath their feet. By dawn, the wind died. The snow turned red. What once was life now smoldered in ruin. The Neanderthals retreated, broken and silent. Tor limped through the smoke, eyes hollow, his victory tasting like ash. "The gods are fed," he muttered. "Now we live." But behind the veil of smoke, inside a half-collapsed tent, Oren found them, Asha and the child, alive but trembling, hiding beneath a scorched fur. He gathered them in his arms, tears freezing against his cheeks. He led them away through the trees, deep into the mountains, where the flames could no longer reach, and where history would forget what truly happened that night. High above the valley, snow began to fall again, soft, endless, merciful. It covered the ashes, the blood, and the bones. It covered everything except the truth. And though the world would one day forget their names, the echo of that night, the night of fire, would burn silently inside the veins of every human yet to come. The world was silent after the fire. The once living valley lay buried beneath a skin of ash and snow. Charred trees stood like black bones, piercing through the frost. And in the distance, the wind carried the faint echo of voices that no longer existed. In the shadows of the northern cliffs, Oran built a small shelter from stone and hides. There, hidden from both tribes, 3 souls remained. Oran, the last of his kind, Asha, the woman from the Sky People, and their child, whose laughter was the only sound left in the world. The boy was different. His hair was darker than his mother's, his shoulders broader than his father's. He walked early, spoke with sounds neither tribe could understand, and when he looked into the fire, the flames seemed to bend toward him, as if recognizing their own. Asha would hum softly to him at night, songs of rivers and spirits, songs her people sang before the fire turned against them. And Oran would listen from the entrance of the cave, his hand gripping the same stone blade that once belonged to his tribe. He wondered if his gods had abandoned him, or if they had cursed him with something even greater: hope. For 2 winters, they lived in fragile peace. Oran hunted small game in the ravines. Asher gathered berries and roots from the thawing forest. The boy grew stronger, faster, fearless against the cold. But word spreads even in silence. From the south came wanderers, Homo sapiens, survivors of the old tribe that once burned. They followed trails of smoke, footprints in snow, and whispers of a child born of 2 fires. When they finally found the cave, it was dawn. Oran was out hunting. Asher awoke to the sound of crackling branches and saw figures emerging through the mist, spears raised, faces hard with fear. She clutched her child, pleading in words they no longer understood. "He is only a child," she whispered, trembling. But to them, he was an omen, something unnatural, a mistake of the gods. Oran returned at the sound of shouting. He ran through the snow, his breath sharp, his chest burning. But he was too late. A spear struck him through the side before he reached the cave. He fell, bleeding into the white earth, his eyes fixed on the boy standing in the doorway, half his father's face, half his mother's. Asher screamed. The hunters fled into the fog. She crawled to Oran, her hands pressed to his wound. He reached for the child, blood freezing on his skin. "He will outlive us," Oran whispered, "and one day they will all carry his fire." Then he was gone. Asher held the boy close through the night, her tears freezing as they fell upon his hair. By morning, she and the child had vanished into the snow. Some say they wandered east, beyond the mountains. Others say they were swallowed by the storm. But the truth was simpler. They survived just long enough to pass on what the world would forget: a bloodline. And in that bloodline, buried deep inside the hearts of all who came after, the fire of 2 worlds still burned. The storms never stopped. The sky, once filled with smoke and fury, turned cold and pale, as if even the heavens had grown tired of watching suffering. The Neanderthals who survived the night of fire scattered into the wilderness, small groups, broken families, remnants of what was once a people. They wandered through endless valleys of snow, following the ghosts of mammoths that no longer came. Food was scarce. Children fell asleep and never woke. Fires burned weaker with each passing moon. And still, they moved, because to stop was to die. In one of the last remaining caves, Sura, the old matriarch, sat alone beside the final flame. Around her lay the bones of her tribe, sons, daughters, mothers, buried under layers of frost and silence. Her hair, once black as obsidian, had turned white like the snow outside. She whispered their names into the firelight, as if saying them aloud might keep them from being forgotten. Far to the north, others tried to endure. They carved tools but found no prey. They sang to the stars but received no answer. And as the world grew colder, they began to vanish. Not in war, not in blood, but in stillness. No one saw the last hunt. No one buried the last child. They simply faded. Into fog, into time, into memory. One night, deep in the mountains, a mother clutched her small son against her chest. The boy's breath came shallow, weak. She sang the lullaby her mother once sang, the same song Oran had hummed to his child long ago. It was not a song of hope, it was a promise. You will not be lost. The wind will carry your name. The fire will remember your face. As her voice broke, snow began to fall inside the cave, drifting through cracks in the stone, covering her arms, her child, her tears. When the dawn came, the flame had died. The wind moved gently through the empty valley, carrying the faint echo of her song. No one heard it. No one saw the last of her kind. But deep within the earth, buried beneath thousands of winters, a single strand of her story endured, woven into the blood of those who would come after. For the Neanderthals did not die in rage. They did not die forgotten. They became a whisper in our bones, a quiet strength that still breathes in every heartbeat today. The earth remembers everything, every cry, every footprint, every breath that ever touched its soil, buried deep, waiting for the day someone would listen again. Thousands of winters passed. The ice melted. The world changed. Forests swallowed the valleys where fire once burned. The rivers ran new paths over old bones, and mankind, the children of the survivors, built cities, walls, and gods, forgetting the faces that came before them. Until one day, the earth began to speak. In a coal mine in northern Spain, a worker's pick struck something hard. Not stone, not metal, but the curve of a skull. Small, heavy, ancient. Its surface bore the touch of time. Smooth as river rock, but shaped unmistakably like us. Scientists came with brushes and lights. They called the place Atapuerca. As they dug deeper, they uncovered bones upon bones, thighs thicker than any man alive, skulls with wide brows and deep eyes. And suddenly, the silence of 40,000 years cracked open. In laboratories far from the dust and echoes, white-coated researchers worked beneath humming lights. They placed fragments under microscopes, spinning time backwards with every turn of glass. And then came the moment that changed everything. A strand of DNA, ancient but whole, extracted from the marrow of a frozen bone. When decoded, it whispered a truth that stunned the world. They never truly vanished. Every human alive carried traces of them. In our blood, our bones, our dreams. Pieces of their strength, their endurance, their emotion, woven quietly into who we are. We were not their conquerors. We were their continuation. Across museums and universities, images of Neanderthals began to shift. No longer monsters or primitives, but parents, lovers, artists. The walls they painted were as human as any canvas in Paris. The tools they made were as precise as the hands that now typed their story. A scientist held a small fossil in her palm. A child's tooth, still sharp despite the centuries. She looked at it through tears and whispered, "You were one of us, and we forgot you." The world listened. Documentaries aired, books were written, and slowly, humanity began to remember the family it once erased. Children in classrooms learned not just of evolution, but of connection. The bones beneath our feet had become bridges, linking us to those who came before, reminding us that the line between them and us was never real. Beneath every step we take lies their memory, and within every heartbeat, their fire still burns. The bones had spoken, but the earth still had more secrets to tell. Years after the first DNA revelations, explorers and scientists began digging deeper, not just into soil, but into time itself. Across Asia and the Pacific, they unearthed faces that did not belong to us, yet were somehow part of us. In the misty mountains of Siberia, deep within the Denisova cave, a single finger bone was found. No skull, no skeleton, just a fragment no bigger than a coin. But inside that sliver of bone slept a genetic story unlike any known before. When the code was unlocked, it revealed a new branch on humanity's family tree. Neither Neanderthal nor Homo sapiens, a third sibling. They called them the Denisovans. Far to the south, in the dense rainforests of Indonesia, archaeologists brushed dust from the skull of a being they first thought was a child. But it wasn't. The bones were tiny, but the teeth were ancient. The creature stood barely a meter tall, with a brain the size of a grapefruit, yet it crafted tools, made fire, and survived for tens of thousands of years. They named it Homo floresiensis, but the world called them the hobbits of evolution. And in South Africa's dark limestone caves, paleontologists crawled through narrow tunnels no wider than a man's chest to find a chamber filled with hundreds of skeletons. Their faces were strange, part ancient, part modern, as if sculpted by evolution's uncertain hand. They were called Homo naledi. Their bones told a chilling truth. They buried their dead. They mourned. They felt. The deeper we dug, the more we realized the truth we had long denied. We were never alone. For hundreds of thousands of years, the earth had been shared by many kinds of humans, each with dreams, fears, loves, and losses, each thinking they were the only ones chosen to survive. And now, their faces stared back at us from the soil, their eyes carved in fossils, their voices resurrected in the hum of sequences and data streams. As the discoveries spread, the old arrogance of modern humanity began to crumble. The idea that we were the pinnacle of creation became laughable. We were, in truth, just the last surviving verse of a song sung by many voices. In labs around the world, scientists compared ancient genomes. They found traces of Denisovan blood in people from Southeast Asia, Neanderthal genes in Europeans, mystery DNA in tribes from Melanesia, code belonging to no known species, a new ghost in our blood, a lineage unseen, a face the earth had hidden well. Some whispered that deep within that unknown DNA lay evidence of a human branch that lived and died in silence, a species that left no tools, no bones, only a faint echo in the genes of the living. The discoveries spread beyond science. Artists, poets, and thinkers began to see the pattern, a revelation not of biology, but of belonging. We were not one species, but a chorus, each voice rising, falling, blending into the next. Every person alive was a mosaic of forgotten ancestors, faces layered one upon another like ghosts beneath our skin. The lost faces had returned. And as humanity looked into the mirror of time, we realized we were not the beginning, only the continuation of a story that had never truly ended. The wind returns, cold, endless, familiar, whispering across the same valleys where the first fire was born. Time has erased the tribes, the hunts, the wars, but not their echoes. The camera drifts over a frozen plain, the same one where long ago Neanderthals huddled against the storm. Now there are no footprints, no bones, no cries, only silence. Yet beneath that silence, something stirs. The earth hums faintly, like a memory that refuses to fade. Thousands of years have passed, and in that time, the fire never truly died. It simply changed hands. Inside a modern city, a child presses her palm to a museum glass case. Behind it rests a Neanderthal skull, smooth, ancient, eyes empty, yet somehow watching. The child's reflection overlaps with it perfectly. Two faces, separated by 40,000 years, fused in a single image. The narrator's voice drifts like smoke. They looked like us. They felt like us. They dreamed like us. Yet they vanished. So we could become. We return, in spirit, to the ancient cave, the same one where Oren and Asher once built their fire. Now the stone walls bear the faded marks of old hands, the echoes of laughter, of tears, of love. Dust dances in shafts of light, where the ceiling cracked long ago. Outside, the snow has long melted, but the story written here remains. As the light deepens, the camera moves closer to a small figure in the corner, bones curled in eternal rest. Beside it, A smaller skeleton, arms folded against the other's chest. The final Neanderthal mother and child. The wind sighs through the entrance, a sound almost like breathing. And for a moment, it feels as if they are alive again. The scene fades and transitions seamlessly into the face of a modern human woman, eyes closed, DNA patterns swirling around her. Fragments of history glow inside her bloodstream. Neanderthal, Denisovan, the unknown ghost lineage, all woven together into one tapestry of life. We were never pure. We were never alone. We are every voice that ever called out in the dark. Images flash. A Neanderthal father teaching his child to light a fire. A Denisovan carving a pendant from bone. A Floresiensis tribe laughing beside a river. A scientist brushing dust from a fossil. A newborn human crying in a hospital room. The same story, the same spark. Across time, across extinction, across every failure and rebirth, the fire passes on. As the music swells, soft, orchestral, emotional, the final words appear on screen. We are the fire that survived, the blood of the forgotten, the children of Earth, reborn. The camera tilts upward, revealing a sunrise over the same valley that began it all. Warm, golden light spills across the snow. The wind softens, carrying faint laughter, not from any living being, but from the ghosts of those who once dreamed we would find them again. Fade to black. A heartbeat. Then silence.